welcome to another very excited episode of E&FtV's Bridging the Gap. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Carmen Mallo, restaurant revenue management expert. Carmen, how are
Hello,
you?
Jason. I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
Yeah, brilliant. And thank you for making the time to chat with me. I mean, looking forward to this for the last couple of weeks since we spoke. So, thank you for giving up some time and really
Of course.
excited to chat about restaurant revenue management.
Very important topic indeed. I believe most of your chats are with hoteliers. So it's great that you're having me here to talk about F&B. I'm very happy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of our guests tend to have a revenue management leaning, but you're quite right, it does tend to be with a rooms focus. So
Hmm.
I suppose with there being so much focus on other areas for optimization these days, it's exciting to talk to people with experience of spa, golf, M&E, or in your case, restaurant. So, um,
Exactly.
yeah, I'm just going to start the show off with five quick fire questions to so that people can get to know you a little bit, the real Carmen.
Go for it.
There's nothing too difficult in there today, so I've been quite kind on you.
Thank you.
So let's go with it. Describe your perfect day.
Right. So I wake up around 7:30, 8, not probably later, sooner than that. Then I get a nice breakfast, coffee, hopefully I will have time for that. I start my day working, I do my emails, I do some recordings of meetings, and then when I finish, I go to the gym. I love keeping myself fit, and I play guitar. I'm a musician, so when I have the time, I take my guitar and I just practice. And then I will probably read a book before going to bed, and that will be my perfect day. Very chill,
So
educational day.
your perfect day includes work.
Mm, yes, because I'm an entrepreneur. Think about this. I'm an entrepreneur by choice. So it includes work. Anything that I can do to help others, I will include it on my perfect day.
That's really interesting and brilliant
It
as
is
well. It shows
interesting. Yeah, so you've never had any guest on the show saying that a perfect day includes work? Probably not, right?
I've never asked any guests what their perfect day includes. It just bounced into my head about t 10 minutes ago. So I'd be interested to learn how many people would class work as being integral to
The
the perfect day.
the thing is, since I started my own business, I haven't had a single day off in which I say no laptop. I will always do something, and so far I've been able to manage it really well because it's my choice and I love doing it.
Yeah,
That's why.
I love that. I love that. But just rewinding, you mentioned breakfast and we're talking about restaurant F&B RM.
Mhm.
What would your perfect breakfast be?
It would be European breakfast, like maybe coffee with toast and some fruit and maybe yogurt. That's it. I don't like anything like big English breakfast, sausages and all that. No. We don't do that in Spain. I'm originally from Spain. And so we
Yeah.
have usually light breakfast. And
Yeah.
then we have
Okay.
lunch later, like at 2 or 3 p.m., which is very unusual here in the UK, as you know, obviously.
Yeah, we went to we mainly go to Spain on a holiday, but a couple of years ago we went and really got into that Spanish way of life, like staying in bed late, having a late lunch, everything being put back a couple of hours
Mhm.
versus in the UK where people generally, as you say, get up at 7 a.m. and have lunch at 12. So yeah, it was lovely. Question number two, what was your first job?
My first job wasn't here in the UK. It was in a bank in Spain. I did economics back home, and then I worked in a bank, and then I moved to the UK. Very random. I mean, it wasn't really a super high job. It was sort of an internship entry level. But yeah, that was actually I always say my first job was in hospitality. No, it wasn't. It was in a
I was in
bank.
a bank. Ah, brilliant. What was your
Yeah.
favorite subject at school?
Philosophy.
Okay, you're an
Yes.
intriguing
People
character.
people call me like, yeah, they say this is weird. I love philosophy, writing, reading, and anything to do with people's mind and mental health. So I
Yeah.
think if you teach kids or teenagers philosophy, you open up a horizon of them to think by themselves. And I love philosophy. Obviously, I will tell you the typical one. I like maybe economy, when they taught us some sort of how to run a business and things. Well, not pretty much so, but yeah, something out of the box, I would say philosophy. I did really well, and it was very rare to do well in philosophy, but I did because I loved it. I knew
So,
all the philosophers. I don't remember most of it, but I used to do really well. Yeah.
philosophical banker with a love for revenue management and food is what I'm gleaning
Yeah,
so far from
exactly.
this chat.
Yeah. So strange, right? I'm not sure what more you will get out of this meeting, but yeah, so far I'm doing great.
So far, so good. Favorite
Yeah.
movie?
Oh, favorite movie? I like, you know what? A movie I watched and it really hit me was Moulin Rouge. I don't know. I watched it when I was 12 back home, or 13 in Spain, and I was crying and crying and crying. And ever since, I remembered that movie. And I went to the musical in London not that long ago, and I really loved it. So that's a really good movie for me that I remember.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Hmm.
Okay, question five, the last one. Cook a meal or order a takeaway?
Gosh, order a takeaway. I every time I go to Spain and I come back, I have the commitment to cook because my mom cooks for me and it's all very healthy and nice. It lasts for 2 days, then I go back to eating out or ordering things. I try, okay, don't get me wrong, I try, but it's not my favorite cup, I just don't do it. I should
Interesting.
because you save money and you gain health, but it's just, I spend time doing other stuff, like I told you, playing music or running my business, running outside. So yeah,
You like to run as well.
I like to run, yes.
Brilliant. Some good answers there. Okay,
Thank you.
so hopefully that's enabled people to get to know the real Carmen a little bit. But
I'm sure it has, yes.
tell us about your career so far then, from banking through to current day.
So yes, so currently I'm the founder of REMS Hospitality. So we provide benchmarking market insights to restaurants and also consulting services. So I live in the UK most of my time, and I've been here for 15 years. I've worked in Spain, I work in a bank. In the UK, I started in restaurants for two reasons. They gave me a chance, and I will be highly appreciated to that, and because I couldn't really speak English. So it's a really good way of starting, and I'm sure there are a lot of people like me. Then I don't really think it was my preferred career choice until I discovered revenue management. So I did a bit of operations, and then I worked for Hilton Hotels, such a great company, and then it's when I became a revenue manager. So I learned and I loved the job. And then after I got promoted to become a cluster revenue manager, then I decided to leave because I was offered a job at the Ivy Collection Group. And obviously I was going to manage a team. I was going to do a lot of cool things because by then the Ivy was expanding. So when I joined, I think the group had 10 restaurants. When I left, we had 50, something like that. So it was a great 4 years of my life. And then after I left the Ivy, I created my own business. I thought I gathered enough information to teach others and to teach restaurants how to optimize their businesses. So that's what I'm doing so far
Brilliant. So you started off waiting tables when you came to the UK, or was that in Spain?
in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
in the UK, I worked. My first job was in Nando's. I love
okay,
Nando's.
brilliant.
I will be very grateful. I used to eat Nando's. I continue to eat Nando's. I think it's such a great brand and concept.
So how did you get from there to Hilton then? It's quite a big jump, isn't it? You're obviously you're in F&B waiting
Um,
tables and then started at Hilton.
Hilton wasn't necessary. I didn't jump from being at the restaurant directly into a revenue management position. So I was first a
Okay.
receptionist in one Hilton in London.
Ah, okay.
And then from there, I applied to an analyst role at the head office. And then I did really well and I got promoted because that was like a natural progression of that role to be like revenue analyst, people producing all the information for a revenue manager to make decisions. And then, yeah, I got the job as a CRM cluster revenue manager. And yeah. So it wasn't really from being a restaurant staff to become a revenue
Yeah.
manager. There was some sort of transition, but it happened fairly quickly, you know. I guess I also was surrounded by good people. They gave me a hand, you know. I got, yeah, it was good. It was a good move, and I'm
So
proud of it. I'm happy.
you obviously always had a love of numbers then. You know, you mentioned that you worked in a bank, you got into revenue management. Talk us through that then. Was there always that love of numbers rattling away in the background in your early career?
I think, yeah, I like numbers as much as I like writing, and but I think my brain is pretty much equally developed in both hemispheres. But you know, I'm very interested. I wouldn't say numbers itself, but data, how what we can get out of the numbers. And I think a revenue manager is the person that has to interpret data and just take decisions to impact a business, and that's what I like. So I feel really good with the concept of revenue management, because also hospitality is such a great space to work. So I quickly related to this job more than operations as such, you know.
Okay. And generally with Hilton, I presume at RMCC, I wouldn't have
Yes.
thought you'd have had much kind of access to revenue management within food and beverage. Did that, where did that kind of interest develop from?
It didn't. It wasn't really a conscious choice, to be honest. I told you I was offered a really exciting role at the Ivy Group. So first, the role was more to look after reservations. I was going to have a big team, and that was very exciting for me. You know, as a cluster revenue manager, you don't really have a team. You work in collaboration with others. But because the Ivy was in expansion, I soon realized there was much more to it. So we had not only to look at reservations, but systems. And then I link in my head ways of applying revenue management into F&B. And I knew there was an opportunity. And this is when I started writing different yield management techniques to basically test new things. And they work really well. So with time, I've proven that some of these strategies are consolidated and are really helpful. But as you know, revenue management is well established in hotels. Everybody knows what it's like. In F&B, there's no such a definition. Obviously, we can talk about it later. But I was able to transfer my skills from hotels to restaurants fairly easy. But you have to adapt. You know, you cannot take like for like, because it doesn't work the same way.
Mm.
So
For
yeah, but
anyone,
going back to your question,
no, go.
it wasn't really a premeditated decision. It's not that I'm gonna, because now one knew about it. When I was at Hilton, now one mentioned we have to optimize F&B, we have to do menu engineering, we need to do inventory management. No, we did all that with rooms. So for me, it was try new stuff and then think, oh yeah, we can do yield management here. We can manage our reservations better. So that all opened up while I was working for the Ivy Group.
Okay. And
Mhm.
so it's interesting that you said that you replicated some concepts that you'd refined at Hilton in terms of revenue management and applied them into the Ivy for F&B.
Mhm.
There are obviously some differences there, some obvious ones, but talk us through for anyone wanting to, I suppose, start a career in F&B revenue management. Just talk us through some of the key concepts and some of the ways that you would apply revenue management in an F&B setting, specifically a restaurant.
So I think because hotels do a lot of pricing, they focus a lot of pricing. Restaurants focus more in inventory management and reservations. So you have to be very good at reservations first. That would be like the first entry point, and then you need to understand your reservation platforms in which you can configure everything and start applying some sort of yield management from what sort of floor plans you want, from what sort of how you want people to book. That will have an impact. Like in hotels, you know, restaurants would not change menu pricing every day. That doesn't happen. You know, you may have some sort of dynamic pricing here and there, but you work more with how people book a restaurant. A walk-in will necessarily not spend as much money as a booked table, you know, or a table of two will sometimes spend more money than a large group. So you have to define that in your reservation system so you attract the people that will give you the most valuable, the most value to your restaurant. And then you also have elements of looking at cancellations, looking at overbooking as well. Overbooking is a really interesting and hot topic in restaurants. They don't like it. And I always say, if a hotel is overbooking or an airplane, why wouldn't a restaurant do? You can ask them to sit at the bar and they will happily do. Then also is call management. I think as because a revenue manager in hotels will only do revenue management, right? A revenue manager or somebody looking after this will do a lot of stuff as well. Try to put them together, from how we get a customer to the doors to how much they spend to how we follow up with this kind of.
Is it interesting what we'll accept and put up with as a general public? Certainly in the UK. You mentioned a moment ago dynamic pricing and prices changing day by day for food. So
Mm-hmm.
we tolerate prices on a plane or on a train or in a hotel will vary. Why are we so resistant as a public, and why is it so difficult for F&B revenue managers to apply the same concept for a meal, in your opinion?
Well, I think because you eat every day pretty much, and the impact will be more shocking than going to a hotel that you don't go so often. And I was thinking about it actually before, because I get asked this question, but also because logistically it's more difficult. You operate with menus, you operate with margins. You have to build everything into a system to get your uh, margins. So you cannot really be, practically speaking, changing from a restaurant point of view, changing your menus all the time, unless you go all digital. If you go all digital and then you have digital menus, or you don't even put a menu, price on your menu, that would be easier. But that's not how restaurants operate. And from a customer point of view, I think it's just because we eat out a lot, and then it would be, if it's meant to happen, it will happen. And I think some restaurants are starting really small. I've seen, when I was doing a concept analysis for a client, I realized that some hotel restaurants, I think, are starting to go a bit. They have a set menu on during midweek that is cheaper, and then go to a higher uh, price for the weekend. Or they do, but think about it, restaurants do revenue management, they do happy hours. That's a revenue management strategy. They do set menus, they do 50% off. That's all revenue management, but it's not really categorized as such. It comes with the business needs. If we need covers on a Monday, we're going to discount our price, but they don't have dynamic pricing as, for example, your burger will cost £5 on a Monday and £12 on a Saturday. It doesn't work like this. But there is some sort of dynamic pricing, and but the dynamic pricing for me was interesting, but more interesting was the inventory management, which I think it's a bit underrated in restaurants.
Okay, talk to us a little bit about that.
So inventory management is, again, configuring your system in the way that will serve you and will get the most revenue into your venue. For example, if you know, again, that a table of two will give you more money than a table of four consistently, you are going to build a floor plan based on that, right? If you know that people booking through Google will spend on average £3 more than somebody walking in into your venue, you will try to drop your walk-ins and get more Google bookings. So there are, if you know that everybody at your restaurant is visiting at 7 p.m. and you're just blocking your reservations before and after, you're going to try to adjust your pacing, reservation pacing, to create a flow of reservations that allow your restaurant to turn tables at least twice a day. If you know that on a Saturday you have consistently 50 no-shows, you are going to overbook your restaurant. So there are, if you know that you can turn a table in 2 hours, but your turn time on the system gives the customer the ability to book for 2 hours and a half, you're going to drop that to 2 hours. You can fit more
Yeah.
reservations. So there are endless strategies that you can do in a restaurant. If a restaurant is busy, it's like a puzzle. It's so much fun. It's way more difficult than hotels. Or I may say this, you may think like, oh no, because we have the pricing element. But there's so much in restaurants that, because it's a very fast pacing, keep in mind that you sell a room once a day, maximum twice, if you use it as a day use, right? In restaurants, you are constantly turning tables. So if you want to apply a good strategy, you have to keep an eye on different parts of the day. Also, if you are selling different items, so everything is playing in this equation, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It's very much like Tetris, isn't it?
It
Got
is
to
a
fit all the
Tetris, yeah.
blocks perfectly. Yeah, and that's it's really exciting just hearing you talk about it.
Yeah.
Heavily reliant on data, as rooms are, Emmys. How good are restaurants at capturing, storing, and utilizing data in your experience?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I acknowledge that there is a big gap in how restaurants use data and what data management represents in restaurant. I wouldn't. There is enough data. There is enough data and enough data providers, but there aren't enough brains to make consistent, conclusive, and let's say actionable decisions. So you got a lot of data, but you don't know what to do with it. So, and also think about it. If a restaurant is busy, they don't have enough staff, and the last thing they will do is just looking at what my lead time is, what my channel management is. They will not care, and I understand, right? So I think we have to separate as well restaurants that don't have a lot of resources and restaurants that belong to a big group and they can afford themselves to have somebody to look at data. And yeah, I was privileged to work in a massive business, that could afford to have people like me looking day in and out at market trends and optimization. But some businesses don't operate like that. It's just simply not a priority for them because, as you know, the market is hugely saturated, especially in the UK. Every place you go, there are dozens of restaurants. The margins are really tight in hospitality. Priorities are different. So if we really want to add value to it, we have to adapt. We cannot just go there with the same mentality of, I am a hotel revenue manager. I'm going to plan your strategy for a year. I'm going to do your pricing because they will just reject that. We have to be quicker. We have to be faster. We have to give them quick wins, things that are going to make their life easier and bring some results now, not in a year, or obviously restaurants don't talk about market share that much. It's something I'm trying to introduce slowly, but they ask around, how are you doing? They look at sales year on year. So it's not the same concept. Everything is faster. The turnover is really fast in restaurants as well. So if you're trying to put a strategy today and you leave the business, someone else will come and change it completely. So you have to learn how to be very, very, very adaptable and dynamic.
And I presume tech comes into that. I presume big companies like the Ivy would have a degree of tech to wangle the data. How
Yes.
easy how easy is it for somebody that just owns one restaurant? They're really busy. They're an owner operator. How easy is it for them to apply um, revenue management that's going to make a remarkable difference to the business without the help of tech solutions?
Well, that would be tough, I guess. I mean, you would have to know what you're doing because the thing is, if you're an operator, you are focused mainly in operations, and then you tend to lose the sight of what's really happening in the market, but you will drive a business with your gut feeling. And that's something that usually is a problem in hospitality, in restaurants, that
Mhm.
operators dictate what a business, how a business operates and how it looks like. In hotels, a revenue manager is an important figure that is respected and listened. So going back to your question, I think if you don't really have the right tech or the right support infrastructure or somebody like me that will tell you, okay, if you want to do revenue management, you should start with reservations, you should do this. I think it could be a struggle because it's daunting. You have all this data, you have all these reservations, you don't know how to manage them. And so yeah, I think that's why we have to create a bit more awareness. I'm not saying that there should be like a career path maybe as such for revenue management in restaurants, but at least some guidance to help these people, even if they are jumping into junior roles to support restaurants with revenue management, what they should look at, So and I think I'm trying to work on this. I write a lot. I put blogs, articles there to help people. I I chat to anybody that needs any sort of guidance. And when I talk about yield management, often they say, oh, yes, this is something I wanted to implement, but I don't know how. But you talk about tech, and it's very interesting because I was speaking to a reservation platform in Spain, very popular. It's called Cover Manager. And they told me, we don't want to be a reservation platform anymore. We want to be a revenue platform. We want to help restaurants to drive revenue, not only to drive reservations. And this is powerful one. Other tools as
Mm.
well here in the UK are starting to give some revenue management tips in terms of, yes, you need to optimize, for example, charge a no-show rate because you have so many no-shows, or you have too many tables of choose. It's time for you to create combinations because you have a lot of families coming to your restaurant and they kind of come in because of that reason. So I think all of this put together in a book will be very helpful. Maybe I will write a book about revenue management for F&B.
I think you're busy enough without becoming an author as well.
True.
It's interesting, isn't it? The government make it so difficult for restaurants, for hotels, in the UK, certainly, in terms of their policy, national insurance legislation has changed. The minimum wage goes up exorbitantly every year, pay more for gas, more for electric, squeezing the margins so much. How has that affected your business? Because I could look at it two ways. I could say you may be more in demand because companies may look at it and say, hey, we need someone to revenue manage this thing because we need to make sure we're optimizing. Or I could look at it the other way and
Mm.
a restaurant may say, hey, we can't afford to outsource, take a punt on Carmen because we just don't have the money. How has it affected your business?
I mean, because I'm a small business, it's pretty much me. And when I need people, I hire them. So it hasn't really affected that much because I'm always back to back with contracts, and also because I'm quite flexible and I don't charge crazy amount of money. I'm not like this fancy consulting business that, I don't operate like this. But I also hear what you say. When times are tough, we people don't need us to do analysis. But as you say, others may think, wow, perhaps we are losing a lot of opportunity here. I haven't really noticed anything. Again, my business is quite young. I'm trying to get more into the market to advocate for revenue management. But I agree, the market is very difficult, but also it's in partially because there are way too many restaurants, and it's not that I'm trying to criticize the industry, but if we are in a saturated market, you cannot expect to have a full restaurant every day, every time, on every shift. So
Mm.
they have to be a moderation in thinking, okay, I'm going to open a restaurant because the fact that you put a restaurant in, I'm going to make it up, in Mayfair, in Piccadilly Circus, right, which are two prime locations in London. The fact that you believe I'm going to open a 200-seated restaurant in here because of this, and if my price per head is around £80, £90, I'm going to make £180,000 a week. Okay, the fact that you think that is how it's going to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen, because you're putting more seats in the market, you are diluting the market share. And unfortunately, there are a lot of cases like that in the UK. And I've seen that you have wonderful, massive venues that are half empty, and it's because there's a lot more pressure in people's pockets as well. Everything is super expensive. You need, before opening a restaurant, and this is what I say constantly, think twice. It's a very hard business to run and to sustain over time. There are wonderful businesses that have been there for decades and they smash it. They know what they are doing, but it's not as easy as just opening the doors, have a good cook, and be nice to. No, it doesn't work like this. There's so many elements that could make a restaurant fail.
You've, of course,
But
got the
I'm
digital.
not trying to be negative here, but I'm trying to
Be
create some sort of
realistic.
awareness that sometimes when we claim we need more help, it's like, yes, but we also have to assess whether there's space for our business in this current market.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, the digital marketing is so crucial these days in a way that it wasn't 10 or 20 years ago. Um, Instagram led, TikTok. There's so much more to consider for certainly, well, for all restaurants, but yeah, I suppose for one-man bands and smaller businesses, smaller restaurants, it's difficult to keep everything optimized in terms of your revenue management, your digital marketing, as well as running the joint operationally.
Mhm.
I suppose this is kind of where you come in to help with that optimization.
I do try to help, but I know obviously there's a bit, it's very fragmented, as you say, you know, now they have to look into so many aspects of it that can be daunting for them because if you're an operator, you just really want to make sure you deliver great food, you go home, you make your money. But now you have to keep an eye on so many aspects, like, as you said, digital tech, AI, you know, now how AI is going to impact the F&B, God knows. Now with there's a lot of I always talk about answering the phone, how important is even in today's day answer the phone because if you don't want people to call you, just don't have a phone, you know. But if you have a phone available, at least answer, you
Answer
know,
it. Yeah.
answer it or make it, yeah. But there's so many aspects in a business that make restaurants lose reservations because of basic things sometimes, you know, because they don't answer the phone, because they close the books, because they don't have staff. So I
Yeah.
always say when I go into a business, let's do the basic right, and then we can become fancy. You know, we can
Yeah.
escalate and give you a piece of software that will do the reviews for you, or we'll do a fancy CRM that will link all the data points for you, and then you know you can build a loyalty program. But I think we forget with all this noise around, we forget what hospitality means. You know, we
Yeah.
forget the basis. We forget it with all this noise around. So I'm a true believer that while we become sophisticated in how we do things, we always need to remain truthful to the source of hospitality, which is deliver a great experience, make that the customer feel warm and loved, and then everything else is an add-on. But I think business that understand this are flexible are a winner.
Yeah. Because ultimately that's what we're in the business for. I mean, people have a meal and don't enjoy it, they're not going to come back, they're not going to tell another five people, they're not going to leave a review. So you're quite right, you build from the ground up and get the product
Correct.
right and then look at revenue management after that. I want to ask you, why is the restaurant industry so slow to adopt revenue management versus other industries that do it so well, like hotels?
Um, well, I think I kind of mentioned this before. It's because I think it's a bit fragmented. So it's not that there is no revenue management, but it's like it's called kind of different. Let's say in restaurants, they call it maximize, maximize, maximize. You know, we want to
Hmm.
maximize. And also because there just hasn't been the need, or maybe people saying, look, we're going to put all these practices together, we're going to call it revenue management, and there you go. We create a role for it. No, like operators are pretty much in charge of everything. They will, if they want to, and sometimes it's hard for a person like me with experience and knowledge to go into them and tell them, you have to take this number of reservations, you have to charge this, you have to, they will not like it because they feel, no, this is my business, I'm not going to. So there is an element of restaurants are led by operators, and that's it makes sense, right? It's an operational business, and then because of what I explained, you know, restaurants work in a very very reactive mindset. It's a very fast-paced environment, so our revenue management is somebody who will take time to think, to look at data, to make changes. Restaurants, if you want that to work, you have to adapt to it. And I think it's coming through the role of reservations. Reservationists are in charge now of adjusting any settings in the back end of restaurants. Like, as I told you, all the floor plans, all the reservations, all the experiences, and all that, it's usually done by a reservation person. That person can take the role of a kind of yield management, real manager. And that is exciting, you know, because if they start learning more and more and more, that role expands. Instead of being a reservation manager, they become a revenue manager. They become a, and this is what I did at the Ivy. There wasn't anything at like a yield management. I started as a head of reservations, and then I created a branch called revenue optimization. And I had people looking at this sort of yield management on a daily basis and phoning restaurants saying, why do you have this like this? And having revenue meetings with GMs. That was super exciting. It brought me back to the time that we had all the calls with GMs and reservation people at Hilton. I was able to move that into the Ivy and do it. That was a big, big win for me. But again, it takes a lot of time, and during difficult periods, probably they will scrap that and say, no, we don't need this. We carry on how we're doing it. So yeah, it's difficult, but it's possible.
But surely that demands a totally different skill set. Your average reservation taker in a restaurant is not necessarily equipped to revenue manage the restaurant as well, no?
It's different. I think you need to be analytical. If you are analytical, you like to look at data sets, you know how to use Excel very well. And it sounds very basic, but if you know how to use Excel and download your data from your system, create some pivot tables, do some comparisons, some pacing, some pickup, all this very similar terminology that we see in hotels, if you are able to understand how demand operates, your peak times, your shoulder times, your events, then you can do an excellent job. If you have very convincing skills, you have to be very diplomatic as well, as you would be in hotels, because you have to speak and convince and influence everybody in the business to say, we need to do this strategy. Or there is a spend per head opportunity in the market because our competitors are charging this and we need to charge this. Because usually operators will do the menu pricing based mostly on margins, food margins and COGS, which is called cost of goods sold. They do it this way, but if me, I will look at the market, I will do a proper concept analysis, I will look at what opportunities there are, and I will say, look, I think you should do this, this, this. And it's important to look at data, not to get lost in data, but it's important to look in data. But the most important thing is make it easier for them and give them actions that are very, very, very straightforward and very easy that they understand. And this is what my role, I'm simplifying my analysis every time I go into a new business. I have given this and now I'm giving the same value, but more easier to digest because they will buy more into it if it's done this way.
Do you see things developing in terms of revenue management within restaurants in the future? Say 10 years' time, how will things look? We'll be looking at more digital menus as was proposed during COVID. Will we be looking at something that I've seen a couple of times, a couple of restaurants, it's been in the news, charging more for a table, um, looking out onto a sunset on a nice evening, for instance, versus one next to the kitchen door. What else do you see happening in the
Do,
next 10 years?
you know what? I thought about it, and I thought when some restaurants started to kind of being a bit more dynamic, I was like, yes, this is the way forward. I don't know, to be honest, because I don't think they have to be that sophisticated and that fancy in terms of menu pricing. As long as they have a fair menu, yeah, they could charge differently, but again, they do it. They do set menus, they do tasting menus, they can have different offerings, like a like any hotel brand that is big, they will have different small brands, for casual, for uh, prime experiences. So restaurants can also do that, and they do. They have tasting menus that are, if they are a fine dining restaurant, and they will charge £150, and then they have a la carte, and they have set menu. They just need to learn how to rotate this to fit their needs and to get demand when they need it. In 10 years, I think tech will have to consolidate in a way that facilitate restaurants' life. At the moment, it's very messy. There's so much going on, and restaurants don't know what to buy anymore. So that's why somebody who is knowledgeable and understands systems will go to a restaurant and say, okay, you don't need a fancy CRM right now because you are only one restaurant. You need only a point of sales, a reservation system, and that's it. Well, obviously something to count your recipes and all that. But also we need to be helpful with the industry, and support them in a nice way, because then if we just sell tech and say, yeah, you need to buy it, it doesn't work, because you lose your primary focus, which is serve food in a nice environment. So when they introduced the QR codes after COVID, as you said, look, it works in some places, but in some it doesn't even work because Wi-Fi doesn't work in the place. So how do you expect somebody? But this is so basic, and everybody has seen this. You go to so many restaurants that are in the basement, literally, and they give you a QR code, and you don't have data, you don't have Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi doesn't even work well, and then you need to have. So, okay, it's not everybody is not performing like this, but I'm saying we have to use our common sense as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
when building a business. And and sometimes I get a bit frustrated, like how much unnecessary tech we are using for no reason.
Yeah.
And I
No,
am,
I had
and I'm
a,
a tech. I'm a tech. Honestly, I love tech. I love AI. I use it all the time, but within reason.
yeah, had exactly the same experience that you described only a month ago. Went to a restaurant in Manchester, was going to watch a gig. Went to the restaurant next door, and it was one of those places that's open plan and you can scan the QR code and order from, maybe 10 different eateries around the perimeter of the room. Brilliant, but no one could log on. No one could get a signal. No one could log on to the Wi-Fi. Walk before you
Exactly.
can run, guys. Yeah, but do you foresee a time in the future where many restaurants will have a revenue manager, just revenue managing, and the job won't be left with the reservation taker?
I see more of a commercial role. A commercial role meaning getting anything under the umbrella, like marketing, sales, and reservations. That is a role that I find very, very, very useful. Because you have one person dictating the revenue strategy, and then anything falls under. At the moment, that role doesn't really exist, but I think the role of a commercial person will be critical. Not maybe a revenue manager, of course, but that again can be done by reservation or analyst. They have some analysts as well. The finance teams, they usually have analysts that can do some sort of revenue management and can lead. But I think the most important is, like, any sort of revenue decisions are taken by one individual that will dictate to all the departments, what we should be doing to drive. Because at the moment, again, you will have marketing saying something, operations saying something else, reservation saying something else. So I think they need the consensus of a figure that understands trends and revenue and can help the business.
How do students watching this position themselves for a career similar to how you suggest? Because you're talking quite a few different skills here for someone working in commercial in a restaurant. If they were to take charge of, say, social media, e-marketing, e-commerce, plus revenue management, plus have all those soft skills that you need working in a restaurant industry, because we're in hospitality. How do students position themselves for this job of the future?
It's a super job. You have to know a lot of
Sounds
stuff.
so cool. I can see you
Uh,
smiling as I describe it.
No, it's a super job. And I think that the first commercial director of a restaurant, I would love to have that role, because I've gained enough experience in operations, in marketing as well. Because at the end of the day, if you want, you can become, I wouldn't say an expert in marketing, but the basic marketing stuff you can do, right? You know how digital marketing works, you know how paid ads work, you know what the trends are in the market. You don't have to be an expert, you can be a generalist, but you know what's going on. And if you are in the food industry every day, you have an idea. Um, but again, if you really want to start as kind of junior optimize or like manager, just go into a restaurant, get a reservations role, and start adding up from there. And then sooner or later, maybe you can grow. Unfortunately, yes, so far the pace is like there's not a lot of progression for a reservation to go up to anything else, but maybe in the future, yes, there could be, if they realize that there's more need of having these skills or people like that in the businesses.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose restaurants have got a pipeline of people that may be suitable for these positions, because anyone or most people that study at university will also have a job, and that job is very often within
Yeah.
hospitality, sometimes in a restaurant or bar. So I suppose the future is bright in terms of career development from from that position. If you're doing an economics degree or something like that, for instance, and working in a restaurant, there you have it. You're already in that environment. You've got a love for food. You've got the experience, operational experience, which is so valuable. Um, there's potential to be taken on in some kind of commercial capacity, I presume.
Yes, and we also want people to love hospitality and not because look, I'm going to be very frank with you. When I did my university degree in Spain, I just don't want to diminish the industry because it's wonderful. But the last industry I thought I would be working for would be hospitality. You're giving the promise that I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to be a banker here. I'm going to anything.
Yeah,
But then why not? Hospitality is an industry like any other industry. It's a business to run. It needs operators, it needs people that understand data, it needs somebody to do marketing strategies. So it's just a business to run. We just operate in the food service or in the hotel, in the space. So yeah, it took me a while to digest, but then once I understand what I do it right, and it's a fabulous and needed industry. Why not? It's such an amazing career choice. We just have to, people like you, people like me, we have to talk about it. That there's space for if you want to not only being a bartender, but you want to move up, but you want to do different things, you can. You know, you
yeah.
just need to look for it. You just need to have the appetite of learning because it's a never-ending uh, hospitality never sleeps. You have always to renovate yourself. So if you have the drive, if you have the personality, you will do very well in this industry.
Carmen, thank you so much. I've genuinely enjoyed the chat so much. I love talking about revenue management and I love talking about food.
Thank you,
So
Jason.
combining
It's
the
been great.
two it's been an education. Anyone that wants to get in touch with you, either to inquire about your services or maybe a student wanting to chat to you about career opportunities and your experience, I presume LinkedIn maybe is the best place to do that.
LinkedIn and also my website, www.remshospitality.com. Here, people can see what I do, what my company does. It's very interesting. I write a lot of stuff. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk to people about F&B or hospitality or anything they may want to know.
It's been a restaurant revenue management masterclass, Carmen. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Jason. It's been great being on the show with you. Thank you.
That's all we've got time for this week. Like and share the show because it helps us attract really cool guests like Carmen Mallo. Bye bye.